I have been a resident in my townhouse community for nearly 3 years, enjoying a mostly quiet existence in which neighbors generally keep to themselves. Each unit is allocated 2 parking spaces that are clearly marked with the appropriate unit number. In all that time, I never encountered any real problems until about 6 months ago when Caroline joined the Homeowners Association, HOA board. This morning, everything seemed normal. I left my unit at 7:30 a.m. to head to work and parked in my customary spot, space number 127, which is right in front of my front door. I never imagined that when I returned at around 6 p.m., I would be confronted by Caroline standing beside my car, phone in hand, snapping pictures. At first, I assumed someone might have struck my vehicle, but it quickly became apparent that nothing could be further from the truth. As I neared my car, I called out, "Is there a problem with my vehicle?" Caroline spun around, and I noticed an unmistakable gleam in her eye, as if she had eagerly anticipated this encounter. "Oh, you're finally here," she said coolly. "Your car is now in violation of the new parking regulations. I've already arranged for a tow truck." I was utterly shocked. "New regulations?" I repeated incredulously. "This is my assigned spot. The very same spot I have used for 3 years without issue." Without further explanation, Caroline withdrew a crumpled piece of paper from her purse and declared, "The board approved new guidelines just last week. All vehicles must be parked facing forward. Yours, however, is parked in reverse." Her smug expression set my blood boiling. I have attended every HOA meeting virtually since the pandemic began, and at the most recent meeting, not a word was mentioned about any such change. When I asked for clarification, she casually waved off my concerns. We sent out emails. I immediately checked my phone, and there was no record of any such notification from the HOA over the past 2 weeks. While all of this was unfolding, my neighbor Marissa, who had been tending to her garden, shouted, "I haven't received any emails either." Ignoring her, Caroline continued, "The tow truck will be here in 15 minutes. If you want to avoid the fee, you can move your car now, but I'll still record this violation." I tried my best to remain calm and insisted, "Show me the official documentation for this rule change." I reminded her that the bylaws require any modifications to be communicated in writing with a 30-day notice. At that point, her face flushed red. "I don't need to show you anything," she snapped. "I'm a board member and I'm telling you that you're in violation." Marissa stepped closer and added, "Caroline, just last week you told me it was acceptable for you to let your car be backed in. I even have my doorbell camera recording of that." For a moment, Caroline's tone wavered. "Actually, your space is different because of its angle. Some spots are exempt," she mumbled, unable to meet Marissa's eyes. I immediately pulled out my phone and began recording. "So, to be clear," I said, "you're asserting that a new rule, one that wasn't properly communicated and does not apply equally to everyone, justifies calling a tow truck to remove my car from my designated spot. Also, please stop recording me." In a threatening tone, she stepped closer. "This is harassment," I warned. "Towing a car without proper notice or authority is harassment." At that moment, another neighbor, Elena, who has lived here for 15 years and even served on the board previously, emerged with her dog and laughed outright. "Caroline, the board cannot impose new parking regulations without a community vote. The master deed clearly says so." Caroline's face shifted through several shades of red as she fumbled with her phone, presumably to cancel the tow truck, and stormed back to her unit. Before disappearing down the hall, she shouted over her shoulder, "This isn't over. Next time you won't even get a warning." I immediately forwarded the video of the incident to the rest of the board. Both Marissa and Elena offered to provide written statements about what had transpired, and a quick check of our online HOA portal revealed no announcement of any new parking rule. Remarkably, this isn't even the first time Caroline has tried to enforce arbitrary rules. Last month, she singled someone out for having a too vibrant doormat, and the month before, she complained about wind chimes she deemed too ethnic. It's clear that she relishes wielding power over residents. I have decided to install a security camera in my parking area tomorrow because something tells me that Caroline is not finished. It seems that several residents have caught her targeting others, and now I appear to be next on her list. Although I have lived in various HOA communities over the years, I have never encountered someone so determined to abuse their authority. Update 9:45 p.m. I just received an email from the HOA president apologizing for the earlier confrontation. He confirmed that no new parking regulations have been enacted and announced that an emergency board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night. I will update everyone once more details emerge. Update 10:30 p.m. I've now been contacted by several neighbors who claim that Caroline has attempted similar actions against them. It appears that she keeps a detailed notebook of violations and takes daily photographs of residents' properties. One neighbor even reported seeing her measure the spacing between objects with a ruler. I can hardly believe what I'm hearing. Early next day. First update. Thank you to everyone who supported my previous post. Unfortunately, the situation has escalated in the last 48 hours, and I feel compelled to document every detail. The emergency board meeting turned out to be a farce. Caroline showed up with her husband, Derek, who seems to be in cahoots with two other board members, and they tried to spin the events as a simple misunderstanding. The HOA president even suggested that we should start fresh and work together as a community. But then, events took a turn for the wild. Yesterday morning, I walked outside to discover that someone had fitted a boot onto the front wheel of my car. This was not a legitimate police boot or an official enforcement device. It was clearly one of those inexpensive devices you can order online. Attached to my windshield was a printed violation notice that looked formal at first glance, but contained no official HOA letterhead or signatures. I began recording on my phone and immediately called the HOA president. At that very moment, my newly installed security camera captured Caroline skulking around the side of my car, attempting to affix another fraudulent violation notice. When she noticed the recording, she quickly shoved the paper into her pocket and briskly walked away. I called out, "Caroline, can you explain the boot and these fake violation notices?" She turned with a painfully feigned look of confusion and replied, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just on my morning walk at 7 a.m. in my jeans and carrying a stack of papers." Immediately after, Derek burst out of their unit shouting, "Are you harassing my wife again? We have video from yesterday." I continued to record as Derek advanced, saying, "Your car is a hazard. It's leaking oil all over the parking lot." This was news to me, since my car had just passed inspection last week. I quickly checked underneath and found not a drop of oil. At this point, Elena reappeared, took one glance at the boot, and laughed. "Caroline, did you really buy that boot from an online retailer? I can practically see the prime shipping tape in your recycling bin." By now, several neighbors had gathered. Oliver, who lives across from me, even pulled out a coffee and a lawn chair as though he were settling in for a show. He has quickly become one of my favorite witnesses. Caroline grew increasingly agitated. The board had supposedly authorized me to enforce parking violations, and now my car was said to have 3 violations already. I reminded her, still recording, "I have an email from the HOA president from last night stating there are no violations on my record." In response, Derek stepped in closer to block my camera and ordered, "Stop filming my wife. This is harassment." Then Caroline shifted tactics. She pulled out her phone and began loudly making a call. "Yes, hello? I need to report a threatening situation at our address. Someone is harassing board members and causing a disturbance." I was stunned. She was calling the police over this matter. Approximately 10 minutes later, 2 officers arrived and patiently listened as we all recounted what had happened. When they asked Caroline to produce any documentation that gave her authority to boot vehicles, she faltered, referring vaguely to board privileges and supposed verbal agreements. The officers quickly determined that this was a civil matter and informed her that she had no legal right to immobilize my car. They instructed her to remove the boot immediately and warned that placing unauthorized boots on vehicles could be considered tampering with private property. One officer oversaw Caroline's removal of the boot. a process that took her 3 tries, while another took statements from witnesses. Marissa provided her doorbell camera footage from the previous day, and I turned over my security camera footage from that morning. After everyone had dispersed, Garrett from Unit 205 mentioned that he had seen Caroline and Derek in their garage the night before with a box full of these boots. He suspects they plan to target more residents. I have emailed the full board with all the new video evidence and the police report number, and several neighbors are now discussing holding a special meeting to vote on removing Caroline from the board. Update 2:30 p.m. I just received a text from Oliver. He reported that Caroline is going door to door claiming that I threatened her and Derek this morning. Thankfully, at least 4 neighbors have sent in their own camera footage that clearly disproves her version of events. Update 4:45 p.m. The HOA president finally called another emergency board meeting for tomorrow night after several residents came forward with similar stories about Caroline fabricating violations and attempting to enforce them arbitrarily. Update 7:15 p.m. My security camera has just recorded Caroline again. This time, she circled my car for about 10 minutes while taking photographs. I've already backed up the footage and sent it to the board. I have a strong feeling she is planning something else, and I'll provide another update after tomorrow's meeting. At this point, I'm seriously considering seeking legal counsel because Caroline's escalating behavior is becoming increasingly concerning. Second update the following morning. I'm writing this update from home after having given a full statement to the police. Today's events were utterly chaotic, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything. For context, after yesterday's emergency HOA meeting, which Caroline conveniently skipped, the board issued her a formal warning and nullified all the violations she had been handing out. I had hoped that would put an end to the madness. This morning, after an early meeting, I left my unit at around 6:45 a.m. and headed toward my car. I noticed Caroline standing between 2 parked vehicles about 30 feet away, furiously typing on her phone. Given the recent events, I immediately began recording on my phone. As I got closer, Caroline suddenly rushed forward and positioned herself directly in front of my driver's side door, clutching what looked like official documents. "You cannot leave," she announced in an overly authoritative tone. "Your car has been declared a public nuisance. I have documentation right here." I replied firmly, "I'm done with this nonsense, Caroline. The board has already invalidated your fake violations." Undeterred, she waved the papers in my face and insisted, "These are different." I, being a board member myself, calmly explained, "I have thoroughly researched this matter. I only have the authority to declare a vehicle a nuisance if it poses a genuine threat to the community." I tried to step around her to reach my car door, but she blocked me. "Caroline, I'm not playing your games. Please move aside," I pleaded. Instead, she spread her arms wide and pressed herself against my door. "You need to take this seriously. I have documented every moment," she insisted. At that point, my neighbor Garrett, who was out walking his dog early in the morning, came over and began recording the incident as well. Caroline then demanded, "You must sign these papers acknowledging the violations, or I will have your car towed and file harassment charges." I took a deep breath and said, "This is your final warning, Caroline. I need to get to work." She retorted, "You're not going anywhere until you sign these papers." As I reached for my door handle, the situation turned physical. Caroline suddenly snatched my car keys from my hand and started backing away. With a wild look in her eyes, she held the keys aloft as if they were a trophy. "You have just committed theft. Give me my keys back right now." I continued recording with my other hand as I said, "Caroline, you just stole my keys. Return them immediately." She fumbled with her phone as if to call the police. I stepped closer, extending my hand and saying, "Please return my keys." Instead of complying, she tried to run, but tripped over the curb and fell. I managed to retrieve my keys as she was falling, but she immediately sprang up and charged at me, desperately trying to snatch them back. Her screams of "Thief! Help! Assault!" filled the air as she swung wildly. I struggled to keep the keys secure and maintain my recording when she finally swung at me. A blow that was meant to be a slap landed like a punch to my face. At that moment, Derek burst out of their unit still in his pajamas, shouting that he would not tolerate his wife being harassed again. Meanwhile, Jared from the adjacent unit joined the commotion. Despite all this, Caroline continued trying to grab my keys while screaming about an alleged assault. Soon, we heard police sirens in the distance. Apparently, several residents had dialed 911, some in response to Caroline screaming, and others after witnessing her attack. Within minutes, 4 police cars arrived, and the officers separated us and began taking statements. Remarkably, the entire incident was recorded on multiple devices: my phone, my security camera, Jared's phone, 3 doorbell cameras, and even the community parking lot camera. The officers reviewed the footage and saw clearly that Caroline had blocked my car, taken my keys, attempted to flee with them, and then assaulted me when I retrieved them. When she later claimed that I had attacked her, the video evidence disproved her story entirely. She then tried to justify her actions by saying she was simply performing her board duties and that I had repeatedly threatened her. The officers were not convinced and gave me the option to press charges for theft and assault. I decided to pursue charges, not out of revenge, but because Caroline's behavior had escalated to a dangerous level that needed to be addressed before anyone was seriously injured. The police arrested her while she was still yelling about parking violations and community standards. Meanwhile, Derek started threatening that he would sue everyone for defamation. The HOA president, who had been observing everything, announced that an emergency board meeting would be held later that evening to vote on removing Caroline from the board. He also suggested that I contact a lawyer to discuss obtaining a restraining order. Update 11:30 a.m. Caroline has been released on bail. Meanwhile, Derek is now reportedly going door to door, claiming that I was responsible for setting up his wife. Several neighbors have since sent me security footage to back up my side of the story. Update 2:15 p.m. I just met with a lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes. She is helping me file for a restraining order and mentioned that I have a solid case for both criminal charges and a civil suit, should I decide to pursue it. Update 4:45 p.m. The emergency board meeting has been rescheduled to 6 p.m. this evening. Several residents are preparing to speak about their own experiences with Caroline's harassment. I will update everyone again after the meeting. Right now, I'm still processing everything. My face is sore from where she struck me, but otherwise I'm okay. I am simply outraged that the situation has escalated this far. Final update. This will be my final update regarding the entire ordeal with Caroline, though I still can't believe how everything unfolded. After my last post, the events escalated further before finally showing signs of resolution. Following Caroline's release on bail yesterday, there was a brief lull in the chaos. I spent most of the day consulting with my lawyer and gathering footage from neighbors in anticipation of the emergency board meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. Around 5:30 p.m., I headed to the community center for the meeting, and that's when things took another dramatic turn. As I was walking to the center, I noticed Derek's car pull up alongside me. Before the vehicle had even come to a complete stop, Caroline leaped out from the passenger side. In her hands, she clutched a thick binder, and her energy was nothing short of manic. "You think you can ruin my life?" she screamed, practically spitting out. "I have proof of everything you've done!" I immediately began recording on my phone, recalling the advice to always document interactions with her. "You're violating the terms of your bail by approaching me," I stated calmly, as she waved her binder aggressively. "This binder contains 3 months' worth of documentation, photos, timestamps, records of every instance you've harassed me, including the fact that you parked in reverse 17 times. I tried to maneuver around her while keeping my distance as the meeting was about to begin, pleading, "Please step away." At that very moment, Derek exited his car and blocked my path, saying, "You're not going anywhere until you see this evidence." As Caroline continued to wave the binder, both Garrett and Jared, who were also heading to the meeting, witnessed the scene. Suddenly, Caroline noticed them and lost her composure completely. "You're all conspiring against me," she yelled, flinging the binder in my direction and sending papers flying across the walkway. Without warning, she charged at me with her arms swinging wildly. I managed to deflect most of her blows, but she was in a state of total hysteria, scratching, pulling hair, and even trying to bite me. Derek shouted something about letting us sort it out, while Garrett attempted to intervene, only to be shoved aside by Derek. At that point, Jared immediately dialed 911. In the ensuing chaos, Caroline landed a solid hit to my jaw before I could subdue her. I held her at arm's length until, suddenly, she went limp and collapsed onto the ground, screaming that I had attacked her. The entire melee likely lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When the police arrived once more, they were unyielding. Even as they handcuffed her, Caroline continued shouting about her evidence. Derek tried to claim that I had assaulted her, but with 4 separate video recordings capturing every detail, and with the entire HOA board watching from the community center windows, it was undeniable. In fact, the board members unanimously voted on the spot to remove Caroline from the board without even holding a formal vote. Both she and Derek were banned from all common areas, except for their own unit. Caroline now faces multiple charges: assault in 2 separate incidents, violating bail conditions, filing false police reports, and making bogus complaints about residents. Derek, for his part, is being charged as an accessory and for shoving Garrett. In an even more startling twist, after Caroline's second arrest, the police executed a search warrant at her unit. They discovered an entire wall filled with photos and notes about various residents, detailed logs tracking everyone's comings and goings, copies of mail that she had stolen from mailboxes, additional makeshift car boots along with counterfeit violation notices, and even the codes to every garage door in the complex. How she obtained all of this remains a mystery. Update today, 10 a.m. I have just returned from court, where a permanent restraining order was issued against both Caroline and Derek. They are now legally required to stay at least 100 feet away from me and are prohibited from contacting me in any way. Update 2 p.m. The HOA has now sent out an official notice. In response to recent events, they are implementing several new security measures. All garage codes will be changed. Better lighting will be installed throughout the complex. Additional security cameras will be set up, and a formal process for reporting legitimate violations is being established. Moreover, all board members will be required to undergo proper training. Update 4 p.m. Finally, news has broken that the unit occupied by Caroline and Derek is now on the market. Apparently, they plan to move back in with Derek's parents while they handle their mounting legal issues. For anyone wondering about my well-being, I have a bruised jaw and some scratches, but overall, I'm okay. My lawyer assures me that I have a strong civil case if I decide to pursue it further, though at this point I simply want this nightmare to be over. This concludes my full account of the series of events. I still find it hard to believe how rapidly things escalated and how much abuse of power occurred within our community. I hope that sharing these details will not only provide some closure for me, but also serve as a warning against unchecked authority.